Hello, Chicken Fillets here, and it's time for another Remembering episode. These series, well, basically I remember about a video game. And with this series as well, it's basically done in a one-shot, one-take format. So if I get things wrong, if there's spoilers, if there's mistakes, well, they're going to be in here, so yeah, sorry. Also with this, I'd like to basically discuss, how I got into the game, my general thoughts about it, and the future of said game. Now, said game today is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Now, I will also be discussing today Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, which is the remastered version of the game. So, how did I get into Crisis Core Final Fantasy? Now, you may be aware from a previous video about why Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core is such a big deal for me, why it's so important. But to give you a brief about this, I was getting back into my gaming. Whilst I was on my lunches at my old job, I used to play handheld games on my mobile phone. So there was likes of Grand Theft Auto 3 I played on my mobile phone and completed in its entirety. I was playing, those Minion Rush, the running games, etc. And I got into a conversation with one of my colleagues and we were talking about gaming, and we got into the subject Final Fantasy VII. And he says, have you played Crisis Core? It's like, no, it's one that I haven't played before. I do have a PSP, so maybe if I dust it off, I can maybe play it at some point. And he said, well, I've got a copy of Crisis Core. I don't have a PSP anymore, so it's just sitting on my shelf doing nothing. Do you want it? And I was like, absolutely, So I was gifted Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. And it is an utterly fantastic game. Now, if you're not aware of Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, this is the brief basically. Crisis Core focuses on Zack Fair. He's a soldier operative, and it's the prequel to Final Fantasy VII. Now, in the original Final Fantasy VII, you basically have to dig to find information about Zack Fair. He is briefly mentioned in the story, but if you want to find out more about him, you need to go dig for that information. And basically, Cloud bases his persona on Zack Fair, who did meet his demise at the that story. Now in Crisis Core, we see Zack Fair become a first-class soldier operative up to the Nibelheim incident and the fateful death scene, which is still heartbreaking every time you watch it. So, what were my thoughts about playing Final Fantasy VII on the PSP? What were my thoughts being in more of an action-based system with turn-based elements thrown in there with likes of the menus where you're able to select it? So, up until this point, I didn't really play Final Fantasy X or any other JRPGs after Final Fantasy IX. Really, PS1, I was in a phase where I was basically more of a casual gamer. That's why the Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII is so important, because it dragged me back into the fold of JRPGs. Now, it was great seeing Midgar revisiting Midgar in a different perspective, in a new set of eyes in Zack Fair's experience. The combat system in this was great for the time. Now, I'll get on to later on what I mean by for the time. The combat system did have kind of I want to say semi-action-based combat system, because you do select your attacks via a menu at the bottom, but it's done in real time. The graphics on PSP, this is probably one of the best looking games on the PSP. It looks utterly gorgeous. The sound, the music which was in this game as well is top notch. A lot of the tracks actually still stick with me. And the story beats in this. I mean, a lot of people will think that Crisis Core has some nonsensical stuff in it. But really, I love every second of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. And getting up to that point, I remember when playing it, and getting to the point in the story where you are told you're going to Nibelheim, and my stomach absolutely dropped, because I knew what was going to happen, and I really started to like Zack as a character. A lot of people at the beginning when you play as Zack, don't really like him because he's very childlike, he's very hyperactive, and a lot of people can get annoyed by him, but I really liked Zack Fair from the outset, and seeing his growth, becoming a first-class soldier, and what he actually experiences with the loss of Angeal and having Genesis go rogue, etc., and him fighting alongside Sephiroth. Now, this was another great point with Crisis Core, is seeing Sephiroth from a totally different light. You see him being a good guy and turning into the dark side. You know, you see it from a different perspective, and you see him, you know, buckling under this new information about how he was created. It's really good. Now, later on down the line, actually no, before we get onto that ending, where you are fighting off the Shinra army, and basically all your the special reel at the side, which gives you powerful attacks, etc., that starts deteriorating, and you really feel that you can win the battle. You keep thinking, oh, I can push through, and you just can't. It's an unbeatable battle. And having that, you know, the credits roll with the music, the price of freedom, and just, it's something else that really sticks with you. And every time you play it, it still brings, you know, I don't want to say a tear, but it does upset you sometimes. But down the line, you know, this was so important to me because it got me back into JRPGs. But not too long ago, we got a remastered version of Crisis Core, known as Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Now, this version of Crisis Core is the definitive way to play it. There's a lot of improvements here, especially with the combat. Now, I mentioned earlier on, you know, the PSP version had great combat, but this defined the combat even better. It took parts from the Final Fantasy VII remake, and they mixed it in with the original combat system with the likes of the menus, etc. But with Crisis Core, it was more of an action-based combat than it was to the previous iteration. The graphics was really brought up to a high fidelity, and I've said this before in previous videos that Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion on the Switch is one of the best looking games on that system. The likes as well of the updated soundtrack as well is amazing. One thing that a lot of people will have, I don't want to say sour feelings about, because that's not the right word, are a bit indifferent. That's what I'm looking for. A bit indifferent about is the new voice acting in it. And I really like the voice acting, and it was great to have more consistency because the voice actor from Final Fantasy VII Remake, who played Zack in there, yes, I know, spoilers, he is in this and he reprises the role of Zack. And I remember before this game came out, the remaster version, myself, Eric Ladd, and James from The Review Thing, I can't even say his own bloody channel name, The Review Ting, we did a video talking about Crisis Core. And one thing that we did talk about is, we had like private chats as well, is they were saying for the longest time, they're going to change the ending for this. And I stood my ground. I was like, they're not going to change the ending. It's going to stay the same. And lo and behold, it's the exact same story. It's just been given a massive lick of paint. So, it's one of my favourite games I played of last year. I think it came in number 2, just behind Sonic Frontiers. Yes, I know, I'm a big Sonic fan. So yeah, it was a game that I am planning on revisiting soon because it is a shorter JRPG, because you can clock in the story with about 12 hours, and if you really want to, do the 100% sort of idea, there's loads and loads of missions. Like, I actually did the mission where you take on I think it's 500 Shinra troopers or 1,000. I actually sat and did that. Now, I wouldn't have been able to do that on the PSP, but on the new version of it, I was able to do that. So anyway, let's talk about the future of Crisis Core. So, Crisis Core in general, we have had the remaster. So, If there is going to be a newer version of this, I think this could come in this could come as DLC. But realistically, we all know that Zack Fair is going to have some sort of inclusion with the new Final Fantasy VII Remake series, because we've seen him come back in Final Fantasy VII Remake. He's front and center in the cover art of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but we just don't know at this point in time in the recording what sort of influence he's going to have in the game and if he's going to be playable. So it's going to be interesting whether it's going to be new DLC where you play as him, like episode Zack or something, or if he's actually going to be playable within certain parts of the story. We're just going to have to wait and see, but Zack Fair's future at the moment is bright. It could be funny, I could be eating those words once Rebirth comes out. Something could happen to Zack, we just don't know. But Zack Fair is back, and I'm all for it. So anyway, that has been another remembering episode where I've got to talk about one of my favourite games, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Now, what were your thoughts on Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like what you're hearing and seeing on the channel, please help me grow it by liking, sharing and subscribing. And if you want to be kept up to date with everything Chicken Fillets, you know what to do, hit that notification bell. This has been Chicken Fillets, and until next time, tatty bye.